In this video I'm going to show how to dismantle a door from a Porsche 996. The same would apply to a Boxster 986, as the door's basically the same, other than a few minor differences to do with the glass and how far it lifts up. First thing I'm going to do is remove the door trim card, and to do that I'm going to remove this cover here, and then have to remove this. There's a screw behind there. There's also a screw behind there. Have to remove this trim piece here to get to the fasteners behind there, and in there is also a screw, and I'll also need to remove this light here. So these are basically going to be removed using a standard trim removal tool. So that's the first job. I shall get on with those. To remove this cover, just lever it up from the bottom, then lift it upwards. You see there's a plastic tang here which goes into this slot here, and then 3 clips at the bottom. Then need to remove this electrical connector. The easiest way to do this is to push the switch through. There's a couple of little things in the side of the switch which hold it in place. So with those, push through, the switch will, and the connector will then slide through. That comes off. There's a couple of plastic locking tangs on here which you have to push inwards. This one's obviously been off before and someone's broken them off. So the idea with these, you push them in to release them, one on each side, and then it comes out. So with that off, now I'll move on to the next part. This small airbag cover just comes off with a trim removal tool. These can be quite awkward to get off, so it can require a little bit of force. Just be careful against the leather. That's off. There's a hex bolt underneath there which we'll need removing. Also need to remove this piece of trim here. So we'll just find a gap to get in and work our way around. With that removed, I can now undo these Torx bolts here. There's a positive drive screwdriver bit in there, and one inside there as well, and that 4mm hex. So I'll get those removed, and then I should be ready to remove the trim panel. Using a T30 on these two. Those two out. Note the longer one comes from this end. This one is a small plastic screw. That one's a small metal screw. This light unit just unclips, so again using a trim removal tool, if you push it towards the back of the door, it will lift out, and then just undo the electrical connector and put that on one side. With those removed, now ready to undo the trim clips. There are various clips around the perimeter, so I'm just going to go around with a trim removal tool and unclip those. once those are all unclipped, the door card should need to lift up very slightly to clear the top edge. And once it's cleared that top edge, the card can be lifted off. Then under here we have an electrical connection, which is a couple of small connectors there, which you can see which way around they go. Black one goes to here, white one goes to here. And then we've also got to disconnect the connector for the door pull. Let's get you a close up on this so you can see how it attaches. There's a couple of plastic tangs on the side, so you squeeze those in, slide it back, and then that needs to be unhooked from there, so you can see how it hooks around. So I'll just need to lift the door card up to get that around enough. See if we can maneuver that through. There we go, that's that off. So now the door card is completely disconnected from the door and it can be removed. So with the door card off, we can now see the main elements on the door. We've got the speaker unit here, which is held in with a few screws around the edge there. We've got the airbag unit with the connector for it there, so that's going to be removed. And then behind that we've got the main membrane. So I'm now going to unscrew and remove the airbag and the speaker unit. The speaker unit is held in place with 6 T20 screws, so let's remove those. The electrical connector's got these 2 small tangs, so they need to be squeezed out to enable it to be removed from the speaker. And with this bracket removed, it means I'll be able to take the membrane off from around the speaker. The airbag's held in place with 4 M10 bolts. The airbag connector just turns slightly to release the back plate, and then there's usually a little clip on these, so I'll probably have to lift this up slightly to get it out. Looks like I didn't need to take that cover off, so the airbag connector just unclips like that. So now we've got the airbag disconnected. We're now ready to take the membrane off. This is glued in around the edge, so I just need to undo these wires on here so the wires will come off the membrane. Try to do it without ripping the membrane if possible. I do want to reuse the membrane. Then I just need to carefully work around the edge, releasing the membrane from the door panel. It's been lifted off all the way around. Then the membrane should just lift off. There'll be a couple of electrical connectors that have to feed through. One here for the airbag. There we go, with the membrane removed, you can now see the glass screws which hold the speaker unit in place, and we can actually get at some of the mechanisms for the glass. This screw here is actually quite loose already, so I can imagine that that would have caused something of a rattle in the car, with it being like that. Another screw down here. That's 4 screws for the speaker. Out. As you can see, the speaker unit is quite a large unit. There's a sort of big resonance area down here. Yes, that's to help improve the bass. There's a little tang on there which fits through this hole here on the door. I'm going to put this cover back in place on the speaker, just so that I can keep all the screws together. So I'll get that refitted and put the screws back on. Now to put the membrane off, you can see the main parts, the inside of the door. This is the frame here that the window mechanism runs up and down in. And here's one of the cables relating to it. Another one over here. The main motor for the window is here. The window is actually held in place with a couple of bolts. You can see one there, it's basically a clamp that goes on the glass. And the other one is unfortunately hidden somewhere underneath there. Ideally, if the glass was in the right position, I'd get at those and undo them so that I can take the glass out to then remove the rest of the winder mechanism. But since I can't get at that, I'm going to try and undo the mechanism which bolts through in the bottom of the door down there. So I've got to remove these covers down here so that I can get at the mechanism. So I'll take those off on both sides, undo the bolts there, and I'll undo the bolts that hold the motor in place on here, and I'll see if I can manoeuvre the mechanism enough to actually get the glass out. There's a couple of bolts at the top here, these nuts here, which I shall remove as well. So I'll get all those taken off and then see if that lets me get at the bolts which hold the glass in place. There's a tie wrap here which I need to cut. That's holding one of these cables in place for the window, so I'll get some cutters to cut that. I've disconnected the electrical connector on the motor. I really need to move the glass to get to the connector, so I'm going to try and remove the cover for the motor so that I can spin it by hand to try to get the motor to move, try to get the window to a position where I can undo it. Got the cover off the motor. That doesn't actually help me in this. I can't spin it round, but I can see that it's quite dry in there, so that will need to be re-greased before it goes back together. So this is the motor mechanism off. So this is the section that I need to spin around. So if I can somehow turn this, I'll be able to move the window to a position where I want it. I need to move the window up so that I can get at the retaining bolt through here. So as I wind it up, I'll just keep an eye through that gap, see when it's in the right place. Okay, so I can now see the retaining bolt through here, so I'll be able to undo this one. And if I undo this cover, I can see the second one, so I'll get in and undo that. The glass comes out. With the glass out, I should now be able to remove the window mechanism. Here you can see where the cables run, so it's basically operated by cables which slide these up and down, and it bolts to the bottom. So with that out, I'm just going to put the nuts back on here so that I don't lose them, and I shall reattach the motor. Now I'm going to look at removing the door mirror, which I think is just held on with these torque screws here. So I'll just get those undone. That's the third one down here as well. Those three screws removed, the mirror comes off. Now I'm going to move on to removing the trim, so I'm just going to pull this off all the way around. With that piece of trim off, I'm just going to move on to removing any parts of the wiring which I can see. There's various parts here. This is in, there's a couple of clips along here which will just lever out with a trim tool. That's easiest if the tangs are squeezed together underneath to get these out. One out, I put up a bit of a fight. So what I'm trying to do is to squeeze the tang together underneath to release it from the hole, and then pull it through. See if I can get in from above to do it. Okay, so that's those three released from there. So this section of loom is now free, but it runs under here. There's a plastic clip under here, which I'll just remove. Unclip from there. Let's see where it's running. It's running down towards the lock mechanism down here. Just release this clip again. It's one where it just needs the tang squeezing together to release it. To remove the rest of these cables, I'm going to have to remove this bracket and get to the door lock mechanism as well. So I'll just get this bracket removed. Again, just put the bolts back in where they've come out so they don't get lost. I can now get at the electrical connectors for this part of the loom, so you can see where this end of the loom finishes down here. So there are two connectors which do the door lock mechanism, so it will be the for the locking, for the part of the locking mechanism. So I'll try and remove those connectors, and then hopefully I'll be able to remove that part of the loom. I managed to get one of the electrical connectors out, no problem, which was the smaller one, which I'll show you when I've got the lock mechanism out, but the other one I can't see how to release it, so I'm going to remove the lock mechanism first. That's held in place by these bolts here, which are actually 8mm spline drive. So I shall get those two removed, get the lock mechanism out, and then we'll be able to remove the connector. Now remove the lock mechanism, well, disconnect it from the door. As you can see, there's a lever down here which attaches the door handle to the lock mechanism. Looks like it's held in place with these two nuts here. I can't get to the other end of this to release it, so I'm going to remove these two nuts, see if I can get the door handle mechanism off, see if that helps. With those two nuts removed, the entire door handle assembly can be fed back inside the door. It lifts out from the outside. So now we've got all of these pieces, they're all still attached together, but I can now get to this electrical connector on here and see that it's got a small tang on the back there that needs pushing in to release it. So I'll get that connector released, and then I should be able to remove the entire door lock and handle mechanism back through the inside of the door. Okay, so here is the central locking mechanism and the handle removed from the door. See the micro switch there, that's the one that detects when the handle's been lifted to drop the window slightly. And this is the linkage between the central locking section and the door lock.
Looks quite rusty on here. I can see on here actually now that that section there should push back, and then this should be able to be removed or adjusted. So if I'd been able to see that from the inside, I've been able to get that removed. This looks quite rusty on here. I might see if I can get that all cleaned up nicely before it goes back in the car, or I might even get a replacement one, because that doesn't look very good. Now that all the door lock and latch mechanism are out of the way, I should be able to remove the rest of the wiring loom. So it passes from here, that end's all loose now, up through this hole, then back down through that hole, and then out through this connector and this grommet here. So I'm going to remove that. And also for this door latch here, there's a couple of nuts holding that on in place there. So I'll get those two removed, and then hopefully I can remove this door stop mechanism. Right, so I'm just going to pull this section of the loom through. I'll be able to use this video as reference for the routing of the cables when it comes to putting the door back together. So I've removed the two nuts to get this bracket off. Let's take this cover off here. Right, there we go. So that's the door stop mechanism, and that's the bracket there which holds the wiring loom in place. So with that removed, it should be much easier to thread the wiring loom through. To enable me to remove the cover off here, I'm just going to remove this tape. So I'm just going to cut this tape off here and this tape off here, so I can remove the plastic cover. Then I'll be able to get this part of the loom out through the hole in the door. With the tape removed from this, I was able to open it up enough to get this cable out. So with that off there, I'm going to now try to thread this again back through the holes in the door. So just try and take each connector through one at a time. So with that removed, there are a few pieces of trim left around the edge of the door, this rubber trim here. So I'm just going to remove this. So this just pushes into some small clips at the bottom. So I'm just going to go around with a trim removal tool and make sure I can remove all of this trim so that the door is completely bare, ready for painting. This trim's held on with these small sort of T-shaped clips. So to remove them, you sort of pull the trim to one side to pull it off one edge of the clip, and then pull it the other way to remove it from the other side. So that just continues all the way around the door until all of the trim is removed. Once this outer trim has been removed around the outside of the door, this piece across the top just lifts up. So it's held in quite firmly, but that just lifts up. all the way across the door till it comes off. So there we've got the rubber surround and the top piece all as one piece. So that's the final piece of trim removed off the door. So all that is left on the door now are various clips, retaining clips for where screws and bolts go in. So I'm just going to show where these all are on the video, so we can see the different types of clips in the different locations, just so that when I've removed them I've got a record of where they all go to put them all back in. So it looks like we've got two sort of spring nuts there for the speaker, another one here that's for the door card, one there for a cable, I think that's another one near the door card as well, another one down here which is for the speaker. So I shall get those removed, and then I shall have a good look around the door to see if there are any other parts to remove. For removing these sort of spring nuts, there's a little tang on there, so if you get a screwdriver just underneath the edge, lift it up and then they slide backwards out of the way. For these clips on here, if you look closely on there, you'll see there's a gap in the middle, so it's possible to get a pair of pliers down the back to squeeze them together, and then you can lever them out so they come out like that. I might replace these if the parts are still available, but I'm just going to take the rest of those out all along the side along here. With all the clips removed around the outside of the door frame, the last piece to remove is this guide piece here, which is just held in with one screw inside here. I've already loosened it slightly. So if I remove that screw there, then this piece just lifts out. As you can see, that's in a bit of a sorry state. That'll, if I can get a replacement one, then I'll just replace that. Otherwise it'll just have to be thoroughly cleaned up and painted and protected. There's plenty of metal left on it, but I'd rather replace it. And then just got to remove this nut from here, so that'll just unclip in the same way as the other ones did. So there you have it. That's the door all stripped down, ready to go off to the paint shop. When it goes to the painters, they might want to remove these hinges. I don't know. I'll leave that up to them. If not, these will be masked around here, but I expect they'll probably be taken off. I just have to make sure that they go back in exactly the right place to come back. So this will all be cleaned up, and this will be repainted. It's going to be done in ruby stone for my project car. So when it gets repainted and comes back, then I shall do a video for reassembling it, which, as all the best videos say, I expect will be the opposite of this procedure. But we'll see. Thanks for watching. Hope that's been useful.